Welcome back, everyone. Today I will be doing a cleaning, disassembly, and relubrication of my everyday carry knife. Remember, life rule number 2, always carry a knife. So to disassemble this, I only really need 2 tools. I need a T8 and a T6 torque, so you could either use the bits that go onto a 1/4-inch drive, or I prefer the screwdriver style. And so there are going to be 6 screws to undo, 2 here for the belt clip, or the clip to go in your pocket. And you have to be very careful because these things will strip out easily. And now you can remove the clip. Alright, next, this is a spring-loaded knife. So it has a spring assist. When you push your finger on here, the blade will fly open on its own. The spring only engages until about here. So from here, about 90 degrees, until it's straight out, there is no spring assist. But from about that 90-degree point all the way in, there is a spring putting some tension on the blade, so you have to be very careful. This procedure can work for just about any frame lock knife. Frame lock meaning that one of the frame members here, one of the frame halves, locks in place there to lock the blade into the extended position. So if you know that your knife does have a spring in it, just be aware of that, because it may try to fly out at you when you disassemble this. Another important thing is that if your knife has a spring assist that brings the, like there's tension on the spring all the way until it opens, it's very possible that disassembling it will mean that that spring will unwind further than you could ever wind it back up without the special tools from the factory. So definitely know what you're doing before you attempt something like this. So anyway, the next thing I'm going to do here is take apart the 3 for the upper frame. And all of these screws are pretty much a different length. These 3 are the same, but the 2 for the clip are shorter. And I'll show you that right now. So this longer one here is for the frame. This shorter one is for the clip. So you can see the one for the frame is easily twice as long. And that makes sense because it has to go through twice the amount of material there. And at this point, this plastic piece that holds the 2 frames apart is going to want to come out. But I'm going to leave that in until I can use again the T8 to remove the main screw that holds the blade in place. And this is the one that the blade will pivot around. So I'm also pinching tightly between my fingers the 2 frame halves, and that way nothing is going to fall apart. At this point, there we go. You can see everything falling apart, and you can see there's a little bit of dust buildup on here. It's not terrible. You can see I believe this is copper. It might be bronze, but it looks more like copper to me. And you can see the wear from this knife right here. You see the shiny ring right here. That's where the little ball on the half here with the frame lock, that ball there, that's where it rides on the blade. And you can see that indentation here. And here's another smaller washer. And then here it's a sort of a Chicago bolt. And then here you can see how these halves will screw together, if I can get them to screw together. All right, there we go. And that hex pattern right there engages on the hex there to prevent it from spinning. So what I typically use to clean out the knife are some alcohol wipes, some Q-tips, and occasionally I'll even throw in a toothpick in there, because this pocket in here where the spring, this is the assist spring, where it rides, sometimes some gunk will get caked in here. Yeah, you can see that's actually pretty dirty. That might be clean for some people, but I like to keep meticulous care over my everyday carry knife because, well, it's the knife that I use for literally everything. And then you can also see in here, right around the edge. And this is why I use a toothpick. It's because it's really good at getting out all the junk from the knife, but it doesn't scratch the frame at all. And really the toothpick is only needed to get around these edges and in the corners. Once you've scraped all that off, then what you can do is go to some rubbing alcohol, and then you can soak up some alcohol on a Q-tip. And this does a couple things. One, it just cleans it cleans out all the dust and debris, but it also helps to clean off all the old oil that was in here. And if you saw like this darker spot here, that is where the spring rubs up against this part of the frame, and it will wear little microscopic metal chips away, and that's why it becomes darker over time. At this point, it's all right for me to just go ahead and use an alcohol wipe because I've gotten everything out of the tight spots. Let's see, I might even clean in here a little bit too. The benefit of cleaning out this is that when you go to tighten the screw, it will ride in this counter bore a little bit more smoothly and give you a more accurate idea of how much tension is on the screw. And you can tell that I've used this knife a lot because even the tip there has been chipped away. I've had this knife for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. It's been a good knife for me. And the spring cover plate. This is very thin sheet metal, so you have to be very careful not to bend it, otherwise it will not go back in place correctly. This plastic piece never really gets all that dirty. So I believe that is it for the cleaning. Really just needs to be wiped down more than anything. And so now I think it's time for reassembly. So there are two types of lubricant you can use. You can either choose to use a lightweight oil. I use, sometimes I use 3-in-1, sometimes I use gun oil. As long as it's a thinner oil, 3-in-1 is thinner than gun oil typically. And you need to use the thin oil on the blade pivot mechanism. So that would be the two bushings, these bushing washers for the blade. Need a very thin oil. If you use a thick oil or if you use grease, it's going to stick and it won't slide freely. And that would also go on to the pin. For the pivot spring, you could use a thin oil again because this it doesn't really need grease. Just a thin oil will be just fine. But I'm going to choose this time to go with my favorite, Blue Moly Never Sees. This stuff is fantastic. It is, it has a lot of molybdenum disulfide in it, and it is very, very slippery. You do not need much to do this job. So, and this will be the first time I've tried this stuff on this knife. I've always used just a thin oil on both before, so this is an experiment for me for, putting just a tiny bit of grease on this spring. Will it work? I guess I'll find out. I'll be the test dummy here, but from my experience, a thin oil works just fine. So I will do the grease part first. This stuff you really got to be careful with because it is extremely messy. So I'm going to use the clean side of my toothpick here. And even that right there, that is far too much. But it's hard to just take out the tiniest little bit. And you can see I'm already getting it on my fingers. That right there. Those two little drops. That's all you need. And what I'll do is take a paper towel on my finger and just wipe that across the spring. The point here is just to put a light coating of that grease on here, just so you can see that hue of blue, which is where it gets the Blue Moly gets its name from. I will add just a little bit more on here. And because of that molybdenum disulfide, that's always a tough word to say. Because of that moly disulfide, that will put itself, the platelets of the moly disulfide will go into the pores the microscopic pores of the steel and prevent extra wear. And my hope here is that I can prevent dirt from gathering in here by using less lubricant. And then this is how this plate goes on. Just match it up with the holes, then make sure that the spring goes freely through both of these slots. And that's all you need. And then on the other frame half, the one with the hex, push that hex pin in there. Now this is the tricky part. You got to make sure that you put the correct washer on the correct side, and thankfully, because mine has some wear on it, you can see that this one has the bigger wear mark. This side has the smaller wear mark, so I know that the bigger washer will go on that side right there. Okay. At this point, I will get out the light oil, and this stuff really only takes a drop. Just like that. And then you can put the blade on, and then pivot the blade on that bushing there, just to make sure that the oil is worked in on both sides. All right, and it's sticking, which is a good sign. All right, so then you lock the blade in, pick up that other washer, try to avoid getting any fibers or dirt in there. Too much oil. That's fine. It's better to put on too much and then wipe it off than it is to not have enough on there. You don't want so much on there, though, that it leaks all over the blade and all over everything and collects a bunch of dirt. So then you take one frame half, the other frame half, put them together. Now here's the other tricky part, is that spring has to go into that hole right there. And it'll be even trickier to do on camera. So I will zoom out here. All right, now that I'm zoomed out, hopefully I'll be able to get this all lined up. Okay, and then you see that slot in the plastic spacer, that has to go on that end of the spring, like that. Just capture it in there. I'll show that again. First of all, make sure that you have the plastic piece in the correct orientation. Spread the two frame halves apart. Note where that is, slide it into the slot, pinch everything together. And now try and get all the holes lined up again. And just wiggle it around until you can get the screw holes lined up. And then just get one screw started, and that will allow you to get the rest of them going. Do not tighten these down yet. There is a special sort of sequence you have to use to tighten these so that the blade will slide smoothly through its swing without binding anywhere and causing issues. Okay. So the next thing I do is get them all snug. And then just test the mechanism to make sure that it still works, and it does. All right, and you can see the blade swings open quickly without any binding. But there's play in there. I don't know if you can hear it. But it is not tight enough. So what I'm going to do is tighten the main screw here. Just a little bit more. Back off a little bit. And there you go. It still slides smoothly. But there's still some play. The key here is to have it as tight as it can be, that there is no play, but it also will swing smoothly. So the way that I usually tighten it is by getting everything as tight as it can be to where the blade will stick somewhere. When I do this, the blade will stick somewhere in that swing, and then loosen it ever so slightly until it just starts to slide again. And that is usually the best place to be. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten all these screws again, because these three do affect how the swing operates. This one has the least effect, this one slightly more, and this one slightly more because it's closer to the main screw. Okay. Still smooth. And almost no play. So I'm going to tighten these down just a little bit more. That one's as tight as it's going to go. That one can go a little bit tighter. That one a little bit tighter yet. All right, still nice smooth action. Tiny bit of play, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten this screw a little bit. I don't know if you heard, but the sound changed. It's now a slightly deeper sound when it goes out. And now there is no play in that blade, so I'm going to go just a little bit further. This is probably where I would keep it right now, but I'm going to go just a little bit tighter. Okay, so now it's not coming out very quickly at all. It's still making it, but it's not as willing. So you can imagine if I keep tightening, it will stop in the swing. So I'm just going to come back a little bit. And that's right where I want it, right there. No play. The frame is locked sturdy. All these screws are tight. So that is a properly tuned Kershaw Leek. The same principles apply to any spring-assisted frame lock knife. And I would say with any frame lock knife too, you want a nice smooth operation, but with no play. Now, if your frame lock knife doesn't have a spring assist, it's completely manually operated, that you either have to use one hand with the assist peg or you have to open it with two hands, then I would say I would want this even slightly tighter to get even more rigidity out of the blade. But since this one has to open like this, it does have to be just a little bit looser. So the final step here is to replace the screws for the, it's the correct side. For the clip. This part again is always kind of fiddly. Always, working with small hardware is Not the most fun thing in the world, I guess, unless you're a watchmaker. And these do not need to be super tight. If you try to really get some torque on there, you will strip them out, and then you'll never get them off. Because this is a pretty much completely stainless steel knife. Stainless steel is very soft, but it's very tough at the same time, which is not necessarily the most favorable material properties if you want something to be easy to work with. And so that is a completely cleaned and tuned Kershaw Leek. So I hope you enjoyed this random video here. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to show how I clean and maintain one of my favorite knives that I've ever had. So until next time, see ya.